Good morning. Welcome to Talking Boxing. It's Saturday, August 24th, 2024. And I know I say it every day, but what a beautiful day we have here in the Macedon Ranges. Neil's very happy it hasn't rained in the last 24 hours, so he's loving his walk this morning. Dry underfoot. And the sun's out, a little bit windy, but just another beautiful day. Not a lot going on in the last sort of 24 hours. We've sort of covered a lot this week, but one thing that did catch my attention was the pay-per-view for Canelo and Edgar Berlanga has been announced. Not the show I'm talking about, the actual price of the pay-per-view, which is September 15th here in Australia. So normally here in Australia, and look, it's not on Main Event, I'm talking about the American release at the moment, but normally here in Australia, what are we looking at, about $50 from memory? Very rarely do we get an overseas fight that's more than $50. I did see, I think, Inoue and TJ Doheny is $40, I think, and that's on September the 3rd. So the Canelo fight, as I said, has been announced in the States on Amazon Prime, and it is $89.99. Now, if you get your little calculators out and onto the US dollar compared to Australian dollar website, that is $134 to watch that fight for the American exchange to Australia. So $134. So I suppose if you put that in comparison to what we pay here in Australia for our big fights, and by no means am I comparing the big pay-per-views we get here to a Canelo fight, but they're around $70, although there has been rumours, and I haven't really looked, to be honest, because, or have I? Did I have a look? I can't remember. The Nikita and Mizuta fight, I think, is it $80? $70 to $80 anyway. And I know there's always the, would you call it, backlash from Aussie fans when it comes to our pay-per-views when they get announced, and sometimes quite rightly so. But I suppose what I wanted to just explain is sort of the reasons why the values are what they are. And I have done a video about this in the past, a standalone video about how the pay-per-view and all that works. But in this case, $134, no matter how you look at it, is a lot of money, even for Canelo. I remember back in the day where we had Mayweather and Pacquiao was $100, and that was supposedly the highest pay-per-view amount ever charged for a fight. And here we are, what are we, 9 years later, and it is 134 Australian dollars. It's pretty hard to get your head around, isn't it? Do you think the jumping up and down like we do over here? It's hard to say, but that's a lot of money. But the way it sort of works is, I suppose, to put into more context, is that, and probably the same goes for our fights over here with No Limit, is that when the promoters put the fights on, say, here, and then the home promoters put the fights on over there, that money is what's actually basically paying for the fight. And I know the overseas money does to some extent as well, but it's really just a bit of an add-on. So, for instance, when PBC put the fights on over there, that $134, of course, is paying for Canelo's purse and Berlanga's purse and the undercard and all the amount that goes on the card as well. So they really need that amount of money when you think about it. Similar to here in Australia, the $70 you pay here in Australia, or $80, whatever it's going to be, is not necessarily just to line the pockets of No Limit and Main Event and rip off us Aussie fans. What it does is that $70 here pays for the event. So we're paying, it might cost $300,000-$400,000 to put on, well, maybe not that much, but it might be about, say, $350,000 to put a fight on here in Australia. So that's money's obviously got to come from somewhere. And I know maybe the response might be, well, it shouldn't cost that amount of money because the fighters shouldn't be getting paid that amount and all the rest of it. But it just is what it is. You know, Nikita would be getting some pretty good coin. Mizuta has to get paid as well, the undercard, and you've got all the arena costs. And don't forget, main event actually take half the money. So if they get, I don't know, 10,000 buys, I don't know, 8,000 buys, whatever, at $80, what's that, 640? No Limit only actually get half of that money, so it's $320,000. So you can sort of see where I'm getting at. It does cost money. Now, again, I have discussed this on another video where it's the chicken before the egg approach. The event's probably not worth $70 pay-per-view, but that's what they have to charge to put the pay-per-view events on. So it's either pay the $70 or we just don't get them. And you don't see our fighters and these cards that they put together. So that's probably a little bit of, you know, a defence of No Limit, and similar obviously to the overseas fights. Canelo, almost, well, it is twice as much. They obviously will probably get about, I don't know, 500,000 people over there that'll watch it. So that's obviously where their money comes from. But I just thought it was interesting that you know, we pay 70 and they're paying 134. And we'll probably pay about $50 maybe for it here, but we're just an afterthought here in Australia for the PBC guys over there. That's where the majority of the money is made. But isn't it interesting? I know the Aussie pay-per-views will never be shown in the States because who's going to pay any money for it over there, especially with, say, the Nikita fight. But there is no streaming service either, which is interesting. And I know my American friends over there, boxing fans, have always said, why doesn't Australia or No Limit have a streaming service so we can watch the fights live here in America, which is a question for the Rose brothers, I suppose, and Main Event and everyone else. But it was just interesting. I just thought I'd raise the point of $134 to watch Canelo's fight. Is it worth it? Is that worth the equivalent here? If we had Canelo Alvarez fighting here, would you pay $134 to watch him on pay-per-view? It's an interesting one, but again, I thought that was just interesting. Another thing I was sort of thinking about, my thoughts late at night when you wake up and go to the bathroom and you lie in bed and think, geez, what's going on in the boxing world at the moment? One thing I thought about was, I did the video the other day, I can't remember what day it was, and I was discussing how good Australian boxing is at the moment and how many fighters we've got fighting for world titles. I think it's about 12 this year. Might even be more by now, might be 13, whatever it might be, but there's a hell of a lot that have either fought for world titles or are going to fight for world titles. But it got me thinking, who are some of the best Australian fighters to never win a world title? And it's an interesting concept, or an interesting thought, because there's a lot of great Aussie fighters out there. We've all got our favourites. We've all seen fighters that we maybe think could possibly have won world titles. Maybe they didn't get a chance. Maybe they did fight for the world title and came up short. But it's an interesting conversation, because sometimes we all get caught up in arguments or conversations about, you know, the greatest pound for pound and who are our greatest champions and all that sort of stuff. But as I said, I just got to thinking about it, and I've made a little bit of a list just as I was walking this morning, and I've got about 15 fighters. Now, I'm sure there's another 50 fighters, but the one thing I didn't put on my list, or fighters on my list, are fighters that I've never seen fight. And we can go right back to the early 20th century, I'm sure, and there's lots of tales about how great fighters were and everything else, but we're relying on just hearsay and maybe some ancient records or whatever it might be. So I think we have to put it in perspective, and that probably goes for someone like a Les Darcy, who I never saw fight. I've seen a bit of grainy footage of him, but and I know there are even thoughts that he did actually have a world title, but he didn't. It was the Australian version of the world title. Now, I don't even know what that is, but this is back in the days where there were no real sanctioning bodies, so it was the Australian version of the world middleweight title, which is pretty weird when you think about it. Is it the early conception of or incarnation of a regional belt? I don't know, but I've got a few. Now, I'm not going to put them in any particular order, because that just gets people up and about who was better and everything else. So this is 15 fighters that I think were probably in the mix for the best that never won world titles. Now, I'm not counting either. Some of these guys might have won like WBF belts or WBU belts or interim belts. I'm not counting that. I'm counting actual WBA, WBC, IBF and WBO. That's the criteria, and full belts. Okay, so here it goes in no particular order. I've got number 1, Tony Mundine. So Tony was unfortunately, he's obviously the father of Anthony Mundine. He had the unfortunate experience of running into arguably the greatest middleweight champion of all time in Carlos Monzon. I say arguably because there's fighters like Marvin Hagler, of course, out there. Sugar Ray Robinson won the middleweight title as well, but Carlos Monzon, an all-time great from Argentina. So he's probably the first one that springs to mind. The other one that is probably equally as lucky, if not more unlucky, is Hector Thompson. Now, Hector Thompson fought for the world lightweight title and ran into a bloke by the name of Roberto Duran, one of the all-time, probably top 5 greatest fighters of all time. And he was stopped by Roberto Duran in the 70s, it would have been, late 70s, I'm assuming, or mid 70s, I think. Actually, might have been a little bit earlier than that, but whatever it is. So Hector Thompson against Roberto Duran. The other one, again, no particular order here, so don't call me out for, well, such and such was better than such and such. This is just a general list of the ones I'm thinking. Jeff Malcolm. Now, I think he won a WBF title, I think, but he had well over 100 fights. He fought some of the best fighters in the world as well, and just one of the all-time great Australian boxers. So it depends on where you want to rank him, of course, in the annals of history. But Jeff Malcolm, very unlucky not to win a world title. The other one is Shannon Taylor, the blaster. Now, he ran into Shane Mosley when Shane Mosley was probably the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. So there's a little bit of a theme going on here, isn't it? We've had some great fighters who maybe were just born in the wrong era, or maybe their opponents were born in the wrong era, I don't know. But running into Shane Mosley when he's at his absolute peak is a very unfortunate thing for Shannon. So he was stopped in that. It didn't help that he got dropped in the first round. He never really recovered after that and gave himself a good chance to win. Then I've got the Hussein brothers, Hussein, who had those 2 wars with Jorge Arce, and you've got Nidal Hussein, who ran into a bloke again by the name of Manny Pacquiao and lost in very controversial circumstances. I'm sure you know, if you're watching this video, you're somewhat of a boxing fan, but he dropped Manny Pacquiao. Referee Carlos Bedelia gave him the long count, and he was able to get up and stop Nidal Hussein on a questionable eye-cut decision. They stopped the fight. So, and I know to this day that still haunts Skinny Hussein. But the Hussein brothers for me. Then we have Dave Sands. Now, there's not a lot of footage about him around. He was probably on the cusp. I have seen footage of him, but he was on the cusp of being on the list or not, just by the amount of information and footage that we have of him. But by all accounts, he was an absolute monster. Was Dave Sands, and unfortunately was killed in a I think it was a car accident. So very unfortunate for Dave Sands, but I've got him on the list. Probably my best memories of is Troy Waters, the late great Troy Waters. Now, he had a couple of cracks I think he might have even had 3 cracks at the world title. I think might at least, but I remember he went to Italy in 1989 and fought Gianfranco Rossi for the IBF 154 pound title, lost that one. We all remember, I'm sure, the Terry Norris war, the 3-round war that he was stopped in. He dropped Terry Norris, and then I'm pretty sure he did fight Simon Brown and Felix Trinidad after that. I'm not quite sure. Maybe the Simon Brown fight was for the WBC belt. I'm not quite sure whether the Trinidad fight was for a world title, but either way, very unlucky to not win a world title, Troy Waters. The other one is his brother, Guy Waters, another one who he lost to Dennis Andrews. Would have been great if he actually had fought his countryman Jeff Harding, but that fight never eventuated. Both guys obviously fought Dennis. Jeff beat Dennis Andrews twice and lost the once, but Guy Waters definitely a very good fighter back in the day. The other one is Kevin Kelly, another unfortunate one. Come up against some good fighters as well, but just fell a little bit short. Then we've got Michael Katsidis. Now, Michael actually won the interim WBO title, I think it was, back in the day. But again, ran into some great fighters. Who can forget? I mean, he's had so many wars, but I still remember when he dropped Juan Manuel Marquez with a left hook and almost had him gone, and was stopped later on in the fight. So that's a little bit unfortunate. Paul Ferrari is the next one, number 13. I've got 15 on my list here, but number 13, Paul Ferrari. Again, no particular order. He ran into, again, I keep saying ran into, because the great fighters these guys fought, he fought probably arguably in the top 2 or 3 Mexican fighters of all time, Carlos Zarate, and did really well. He survived against an absolute monster, or beast, whatever you might want to call it, in Carlos Zarate. He was busted up, he was cut. I think he survived, what was it, the 13th or 14th round, I think it was. Which no one had really done up to that stage. Everyone was getting blown away by Carlos Zarate, and he managed to hang in there. The last two I've got, Paul Briggs. Now, he fought twice for the WBC light heavyweight title, and had come up short in both of those fights, but I'm trying not to probably remember the Danny Green fight. I want to wipe that from my memory, and I'm sure you do too. Very, very forgettable fight, that one with Danny Green, but obviously Paul had a lot of issues outside the ring at that stage. But outside that, a very, very good fighter, came from a Muay Thai background and kickboxing, and really performed well on the world stage. And the last one I've got, just to cap everything off, is Graham Brook. He had all the ability in the world. He was touted as a future world champion. But just like Lester Ellis did, he ran into an experienced Barry Michael, and Barry Michael pretty much, I won't actually put it on Barry that he ruined his career, but really stopped him short in his career, and he never really recovered after that. And you know, he's a great bloke too, Porky, but had all the ability in the world. He was touted as the next Lionel Rose. I'm pretty sure he might have even been related to Lionel Rose, but never was to be for Graham Brook. So look, there's just 15 fighters that I think were very, very, I won't say unlucky, some of them were unlucky, but most of all just the best, in my opinion, the best Aussie fighters that fought for and never won a world title. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm sure you've got some that you would put on the list as well. But either way, it's not an argument, it's just an observation. So put them down below and let us know your thoughts. But guys, that is it for today. Look forward to talking more boxing with you tomorrow morning. Have a good day.